Good morning, and we'll call to order the meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. Mr. Snow.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. First item is to call the meeting to order and approve the agenda.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Your next item is to receive the General Manager's Report. We have a presentation to go along with that on the screen. The RTC recently partnered with the Southern Nevada Graffiti Coalition, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, DARE Division, and Graffiti Investigation Units, and Vector Media Las Vegas to host the 2011 Anti-Graffiti Art Contest. More than 20 local elementary schools participated in this year's contest, and they submitted over 475 entries. The entries are narrowed down to 10, and the winners were selected by an online community poll. The grand prize winners of this year's contest is Carlos Gonzalez of Ruby Thomas Elementary School and Ashton Fink of the Meadow School. If we can go to that presentation now, we'd like to take a look at the pictures of these winners displaying their art. We may not be able to do that.
Do we have anybody in the overhead room?
Well, I'll just tell you, while we wait to see if someone's there or not, that their artwork will travel the Valley streets on the RTC transit vehicles for 1 year to promote the anti-graffiti message. And the artwork of the other finalists will be displayed on transit shelters and inside various RTC transit vehicles, courtesy of Vector Media. So we're very grateful to our partners in this regard. We have a number of other awards to share with you today. The Nevada chapter of the American Public Works Association recently recognized the Bonneville Transit Center with the Fall 2011 Project of the Year Award for structures over $20 million. The American Public Works Association supports and recognizes the special achievements of those public or quasi-public agencies which are engaged in the construction of Nevada Public Works projects. And the Fall Conference Project of the Year Awards are evaluated on the basis of service to the community, community need, intricacy of design, aesthetic consideration, difficulty of construction, cost, growth, and time growth, and complexity of financing. To present the award to the board today is Michael Holloway from the American Public Works Association Nevada chapter. Mr. Holloway. I don't care who. You don't care? Whoever. Yeah, let's get him up here.
I'm one of the few engineers that like to talk. But as past president of APWA Nevada, it is a pleasure to give this award to the Bonneville Transit Station. As a downtown resident, I want to say it is wonderful to give the award to something that has really brightened the downtown. That is a beautiful building. And as a LEED accredited professional, I am also proud to say that it is gold certified by LEED. So anyway, normally RTC is the funding partner and doesn't get to share in these awards. Clark County Public Works, the City of Las Vegas, City of Henderson, North Las Vegas, Boulder City, City of Mesquite, I hope I covered everybody, wins awards over the years. And they get them because they run the project. But this is a project that RTC ran, and they get to win it. And we want to congratulate Jacob and his great team, Mike Han, Phil Heaney, David Swallis sitting back in the back there. I worked on the new City Hall project, and with it had to coordinate with this transit station. And it was always a pleasure to deal with RTC staff. And so with this, I congratulate RTC, congratulate this board, and congratulate Southern Nevada for a project well done.
Our thanks to Mr. Holloway. We really appreciate his gracious words to the staff and to the board, and we appreciate the great working relationship we have with the private sector here and also with this great not-for-profit organization, the American Public Works Association. I will add that the RTC's Bonneville Transit Center was, oh, we've got some artwork. Go ahead. We'll take a look at the artwork that won. Those are the winners right there. Congratulations to them. We'll see their artwork on our buses, and other winners will have their artwork displayed on bus shelters and inside buses the next coming year. Let's go ahead. There's our lovely Bonneville Transit Center where you got the award from the American Public Works Association. And there's another picture we're going to see next because Engineering News Record also gave an award to the RTC for Best 2011 Project. It received an Award of Merit for the Best Green Building category, and that was given by this national publication from a panel of 15 judges from all walks of the industry. We're very honored to receive this award as well. And I have another award to show you here, which is the Pinnacle Award from the Public Relations Society of America, Las Vegas chapter. They held their award ceremony recently, honoring excellence in communication in Southern Nevada, and the RTC was recognized at this ceremony for your flashing yellow arrow public service announcement. And the lady to my left, Christina Quigley, and John Penuelos from the City of Henderson starred in this public service announcement, as I think you will all remember that lovely, lovely race car that is not part of the RTC fuel, or not part of the RTC fleet. It was donated by a very gracious rental car company for that award. We also received an Award of Merit for securing the front cover and editorial. If we can go to the next slide. The next one, please. We received an Award of Merit for securing the front cover and editorial in TM&E, which stands for Transportation Management and Engineering. It's a supplement of Roads and Bridges magazine, and I will say for the record that this photo was taken by my wife, and she was not compensated for her time. She volunteered to do this as a service to the RTC, and she did a wonderful job. Her name is Cheryl Snow. So my thanks to Cheryl, and thanks to the RTC staff and to the good folks at Roads and Bridges magazine for this award. That concludes your general manager's report, Mr. Chairman.
Comments or questions from the board? Are there any Oscar-related awards given to those that participate in the commercials?
Nothing.
I believe they have a minimum budget that they specify before giving awards, and we were well below that minimum threshold, Mr. Chairman. I don't know, Tina, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I got a pair of sunglasses out of it.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Your next item is citizens' participation.
If you wish to speak during the public comment period, please fill out a public comment card. Our first public comment period today is limited to items that are on today's agenda only. If you would like to speak on an item that is under the Commission's purview but is not on today's agenda, we will have a second public comment period at the end of the meeting. And we have Patricia Anderson. Now, Patricia, are you going to speak on an agenda item or later on in the meeting?
This is only an agenda item because I can't stay for the whole meeting because I have other things.
Okay, we have 41 and 42.
I have been very concerned for a long time. We need to settle. I know we've been going through this for a long time. You have a great company, this Fuloria, okay? It's a good company. The drivers are great. We need to sign the contract. We can't go, we can't worry about, shelters, we can't worry about garbage cans, we can't worry about all this stuff, that's all well and good. But we have to secure their jobs. And they are there, and they have been very concerned. And also, as far as cutting their money, as far as their pay is concerned, as far as their lunch hour is concerned, that should go back. You got good drivers out there. They're all hours of the night and everything. And we don't need to go to another company. And then you're going to end up being the same thing. We went through enough with CAT. I've been here for almost 11 years. And we've come a long way. You have a great company with Veolia, and they're there. We need to sign the contract. We need to, we need to secure these drivers. We need to do it now. We can't keep going on. We let us, I mean, I would like to be able to work with you. I don't mind, because I'm there every day. I mean, we need, as passengers, we need them. And we need, and I'm not going to hold up any longer, because like I said, I can go on, and I understand that, and I know you have things to do. It's just that we need them. We need them very bad. They're concerned and what have you. If we can just, what I feel this right now is, let things stay as it is. We need to sign the contract. That I can't stress this enough. Okay? Because as I say, I'm from New York City. The operation, I mean, even though it's a little bit of operation, they're there, they're concerned, and the drivers stay. They don't leave, they retire. Okay? So as I say, I won't hold up any longer, and you all can call me, not a problem, anytime, and I'm always available, to meet with anybody, okay?
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak during our initial public comment period? Seeing and hearing no one, we'll close the comment period.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Your next item is to consider your consent agenda, which is made up of items 4 through 37.
Comments or questions from the board? Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. We now go to the Metropolitan Planning Organization portion of your agenda, and item 38 is to receive a report on the progress of the current Complete Streets initiative. Now, we have been in the process since summer of 2010 of working with all of the RTC member entities on a Complete Streets effort. This is a copy of the draft study that I have in my hand. The primary effort and emphasis behind this Complete Streets effort is to improve safety, not just for pedestrians, not just for cyclists, not for transit riders only, but for other motorists as well. Studies indicate that when elements of complete streets are applied in our transportation network, that a significant increase in safety is realized. We appreciate the efforts of the Southern Nevada Health District and some of the funding that they have provided for this effort. They brought in experts from the National Complete Streets Coalition, who have conducted their own workshops with all the entities and the stakeholders here. We're in the process of developing a draft policy, and I'd like to talk to you about some of the elements behind how we've come to this state, and some of the work that the RTC has done in the past, some of the efforts in Complete Streets that we're working on right now, and where we're going in the future in the area of Complete Streets. And if we can go to the next slide, that would be terrific. This is a poster that I got from the wall of one of the traffic engineers that works for the RTC. And to him, being a traffic engineer, he views this as art, and so it's framed on his wall. But as we look at it, as members of the general public, we might see a different sort of interpretation. Now, this is an old picture. This is from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and many of the streets that we drive on or ride on or walk on today, we need to keep in mind that they were designed 50 or 60 years ago. And there were different standards and a different emphasis. And we get streets like this today primarily because since the advent of the automobile and post-World War II America, the demands of the public have been to speed up traffic and to make cars go faster. And they put that pressure on our traffic engineers, and they have responded with streets that look like this. We can go to the next slide, please. Go ahead, and this is in a street in Florida. If you can push the button, we'll see we're trying to focus on one of the elements of this street here. You can see that's with that circle there is a pedestrian crossing the street mid-block there. These types of streets have not always been the most friendly for pedestrians, and let's go to the next slide. You recognize this is Sahara Avenue in Las Vegas. Let's go ahead to the next emphasis, this is one of our bus stops. These types of streets aren't the friendliest for our customers on the bus system as well. Next slide, please. Many of the elements of these streets, if we can push the next button, we'll focus on. You don't see too many pedestrians on streets like these. And many times, if there are pedestrians on streets like this, they are because they have no other option. They may be disabled, they may be elderly, they may not have access to other modes of transportation. Let's go to the next slide, please. And we still see several streets throughout our valley that don't have any sidewalks whatsoever, like this street here on Edna, near Rainbow Drive. Because of the past and the design considerations that have taken place in the past 50 years, oftentimes people will signal out traffic planners and engineers as villains, leading to the decline of cities and quality of life for a number of reasons. The primary reason is because the public has said that we want to move automobiles faster, and that's what they have mandated for us. Let's go to the next slide. In the past 50 years, we have seen this happen for a number of reasons. We have taken out on-street parking because we want to move more cars and we want to move them faster. We have removed street trees because we want to move more cars and we want to move them faster. We have widened roadways because we need to move more cars and we need to move them faster. We have widened lanes on roadways so that we can have the cars in those lanes move even faster and not have any obstructions. We have widened intersections so we can move more cars and move them faster. And we have taken out sidewalks, removed them so we can accommodate more cars and move them faster. In many cases, we see indications around the community where people will take traffic engineering into their own hands and put out their own information to motorists, trying to get them to slow down because there are pedestrians and children playing in the areas. And some of the worst behavior we see from drivers in this community occurs at local elementary schools. This is an elementary school very near where I live, and twice a day we see very, very long lines of cars lining up, queuing up on the streets around these elementary schools for a number of reasons. Even though everyone that goes to this elementary school is within a 5 or 10 minute walk, most parents don't want to allow their children to drive or to walk or to bike on streets where there is so much traffic and cars are moving so fast. This is an area where only one particular stream of cars is supposed to be allowed into the school, but people are so impatient from all this waiting that we see 2 cars going in at once into the entrance of the school. And you can see that pedestrian there who's actually walking to school, creating a very hazardous environment for her as she walks to and from school. This is the other end of the traffic coming up the street to drop their kids off at the elementary school. Twice a day this occurs. Recent information on studies about pedestrian safety with regard to a speed of a vehicle indicates that if you are hit as a pedestrian by an automobile that's traveling more than 40 miles per hour, there's a 90% chance that you're going to die. If you slow down to 30 miles per hour, your chances of dying go down significantly to 45%. And if you go down to 20 miles per hour or below, there's a very good chance you will survive that accident. 95% chance that you'll survive, a 5% chance of death. Very interesting information. This is information that's compiled by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration through their FARS database. It's a fatality reporting service, and these are the locations of the pedestrian fatalities from an automobile crash, pedestrian automobile crash, since 2000, from 2001 to 2009. When we look at this information, 90+% of these fatalities are on an arterial roadway with a speed limit of 35 miles per hour or greater, with most of them on an arterial roadway with a speed limit of 45 miles per hour. This information leads us to conclude that we may be more concerned, as the general public may be more concerned and give a higher priority to driving fast than to pedestrian safety. This is a street outside my neighborhood, very wide streets. When you have the block walls on both sides of the street, you can see that you get this kind of a tunnel effect where there really is not much of a street wall presence. And so that wide expanse sends signals to your brain, drive fast. And that's what we see, is many times motorists exceeding the speed limit on these types of streets with the block walls on them. And we see that in a number of areas around our valley. Please keep going. And when we have those types of block walls that essentially isolate and segregate neighborhoods, it makes it so that even if we wanted to send our children to walk to school, they can't get there because the block wall is in the way. And that just creates a lot of additional driving that we would not have otherwise. Just to show you what we have with conventional, relatively recent land use, this is an area that you can see as we go through these slides where this is at. Fort Apache and Charleston. And if you live in a home in this neighborhood here with the yellow-topped roofs and you want to take your son or daughter to karate practice, which is in the commercial area just a few hundred feet away, you can't get there by walking because there's a block wall around that entire subdivision, as there are around all the subdivisions that you see on this screen here. The two black circles are the only two ways into and out of this subdivision via automobile. And so you're really forced to drive to go anywhere, even for daily uses, even though the commercial land use may be just over the block wall. And so you have to get out onto an arterial street to make a left-hand turn, to make another left-hand turn on an arterial street, all with traffic signals. And you drop your son or daughter off at karate practice, and then you have to make the return trip back. And by the time you've fought all the traffic and gone through all the traffic signals, it's time to go pick up your son or daughter at karate practice. And you make the return trip to pick the son or daughter up, and then you make the return trip home. Because of the way we develop, and I'm picking on myself, having a background in urban planning, it's not the traffic engineers that are creating all of these problems. It is the public who is telling us the way they want to drive and the way they want to live. And they have put pressure on the land use planners to segregate themselves off from the rest of the world and take advantage of one of the primary advantages of the automobile, which is speed. We can live further away, we can live in a dispersed fashion, but that means that anywhere we go has to be in an automobile, and that's why we have traffic problems, is because this way of development literally generates automobile trips that could be made very easily by walking or by biking. Between the home and the karate practice is about a quarter of a mile, but to drive it is almost a mile and a quarter, times 4. Now you contrast that with traditional land use development patterns like we've seen here in this community in a previous time. This is downtown Las Vegas, once again on Charleston, but here in downtown at Las Vegas Boulevard. If you live in this residential area here, which still has a high value associated with it, and you wanted to go a short distance away to karate practice, there are a number of different ways you can make that trip because of the grid pattern. No block walls, short blocks, tight turns. You can walk, you can bike, you can drive, and if you do drive, you don't have to get out onto an arterial street, and you don't have to go through a traffic signal, and you're not creating so many automobile trips that you have to actually put in more traffic signals to manage the traffic. And so that's a much more efficient and sustainable way to go about development, is to get rid of those block walls. And you can even keep the block walls as long as you make them permeable to pedestrians and provide access points into and out of the block walls so people can walk or people can bike. But the idea is to have better connectivity. Now, in the future, traffic planners and engineers, including the people in this room, from the public works departments and from the planning departments of all of our member entities, will be seen as heroes and heroines, leading to the rise of cities and the quality of life and the improvement of safety in our roadways by doing the following things. We're going to be adding back on-street parking, as you can see, so that we can calm traffic and we can improve safety. We're going to be adding back street trees so we can calm traffic and slow cars down and improve safety. And we're going to be narrowing roadways, putting them on road diets so that we can calm traffic and slow traffic down. And we're going to be narrowing lanes so we can slow traffic down and calm traffic. And we're going to be replacing widened intersections with roundabouts in the areas where we can feasibly add roundabouts. And we're going to be adding sidewalks so that we can increase the capacity of our transportation system, make it safer for pedestrians, and that we can calm traffic and we can slow traffic down. There is a difference between traveling fast because there's a high speed limit and getting to our destinations fast. Because really the thing that controls how fast we get to our destinations isn't the speed limit, it's the number and the synchronization of the traffic signals that really control our travel time. When we lower speeds, we actually have an easier time of synchronizing the traffic signals, because the convoys of traffic, when they get the green light, and the platoons of traffic, if they're traveling at a slower speed, they're more concentrated together, and it's easier to progress them through the traffic signals. Now, I wanted to show you this shot. This screenshot is downtown Portland, Oregon, and there are a number of complete streets elements in this picture. Very wide sidewalks, on-street parking, street trees, very narrow lanes, narrow intersections, and it's hard to see it, but there's transit on this street here. The streetcar is down the street there. It's difficult to see. All of the elements that we just talked to you about over the next 50 years that we're planning on implementing into our street network to be heroes and heroines to our public. And in this community here in downtown Portland, more than 50% of all the trips that are made in this community are made by foot. You have a mixture of land uses. There's no block walls. The bottom floor of these buildings is commercial. The top is residential. And there are relatively few automobile trips in this community. We see other communities around the country making similar progress. We can go to the next slide, please. We have a video to show you that we're going to jump out of the PowerPoint and go to the video that epitomizes some of these elements. And there is a dedicated bicycle lane that's been added to a very busy, formerly very busy by automobile traffic street in New York City, of all places. And we think that the board may be very interested in seeing this, because there is a combination of a protected bicycle lane from the automobile traffic by virtue of adding street parking onto this street in New York City, and that on-street parking creates a barrier between the bicyclists and the sidewalk. And there are a lot of very positive reaction to this and other similar types of developments of complete streets that have gone into this part of Manhattan in New York City.
I support the Prospect Park West redesign. I think it's a great example of a community-driven project. The community board asked for it, both to reduce speeding and calm traffic on Prospect Park West, and to create a safe place to bike and to make Prospect Park West safer for all its users.
Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had a big push for traffic calming. At the same time, the Bloomberg administration was moving toward adding bike lanes. When it came to Prospect Park West, it seemed a perfect opportunity to combine the two, to both narrow, it was a three-lane, a racetrack essentially, while providing a very important link in the bicycle path system around the city. So the Community Board 6 Transportation Committee, jumped on that and felt that it was a worthwhile project.
A lot of people who live on Prospect Park West have reported to me that before it felt to them like living on a speedway. I drive, and I remember, you could zoom in and out of those three lanes, and there was something fun about it, but it was dangerous. And I think folks who drove it knew it, and folks who lived there felt it.
A road like this, by slowing down the motor speeds from about just under 35 miles an hour to just above 25 miles an hour, that begins to make a dramatic increase in pedestrian safety for lots of reasons. Cars are more likely to yield to them. Cars, the stopping distance is shorter once they spot a pedestrian in the roadway. And even in the unfortunate incident of there being an impact, the likelihood of severe injury is less at the slower speeds.
One of the primary advantages of slowing traffic down when you get 25 miles per hour or below is when we're driving faster than that in these 2-ton automobiles, we're driving too fast to make eye contact with even other drivers, much less a pedestrian or cyclist. When we slow down slow enough, we can make that eye contact, and all of a sudden our behavior might rehumanize, where we can actually see that there are people and we can actually interact with them when we're going that slow. We wanted to share with you this effort that really has been underway by our partner jurisdictions in the county and the cities and the RTC for more than 10 years now. And one of the evidences of that is this roadway that you see on Alta Drive in Las Vegas. There are a number of complete street elements. First of all, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen the dedicated bike lane, which does have some protection with the bollards that have been constructed there. But on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see this is the RTC's downtown to Red Rock bicycle trail, all the way up Alta. But look at that sidewalk that is offset from the pavement area, from the asphalt, and you can see that it's landscaped. And you can also see, as you look in the left-hand portion of that picture, there's landscaping there. That's just a landscaped raised median that separates you from the vehicle lanes on the other side of the street. It is a road that most people feel comfortable and safe walking, biking, or driving. Very good example of a complete street with some very good complete street elements in it. We're also working with the City of Las Vegas in designating our bicycle lanes and making them much more apparent to drivers by adding the green, I guess this is tape. What do you call this, Fred, Mike?
It's plastic, thermoplastic.
It's a thermoplastic. We put this as a demonstration and testing project in coordination with the City of Las Vegas right outside the Bonneville Transit Center. And the test has been very successful, very pleased with this, and we will be adding this in areas where we have designated bike lanes where we can get the concurrence of the local jurisdiction that's involved. And so kudos and thanks to Jorge Cervantes of the City of Las Vegas for his leadership in this effort here. Grand Central Parkway is, I think, one of the best examples of a complete street that we have that we can point to. It's right outside this building. You've all seen it. You've all used it. The wide sidewalks, the special centennial design of the street lights, the sidewalks, everything else, the landscaping, the transit. We still have 4 lanes of automobile traffic. This is a roadway that I use almost every day. I walk it, I bike it, I take transit, and I drive on it. I feel safe and comfortable in all of those modes. Complete streets are complete because they are designed with all modes of transportation in mind. And they're also designed with all ages of individuals in mind, young and old, and they're also designed for those who are disabled in mind, all users of the transportation system. That's what makes a street complete, if it has that type of design. Our bus shelters, this is just a regular bus shelter that we have. It's not one of our express bus shelters, but these are all solar powered now. There is much better lighting at night, and we've seen, as you're aware, a rash of pedestrian automobile accidents over the past few months, and we can't help but notice that the locations for where this is happening are where we do not have complete street elements in place. And we've had a lot of this recent rash of accidents have taken place when it's dark. And we're going to need to look at and work with providing better illumination, possibly in conjunction with our colleagues in Public Works and in planning as we go forward. This is a great example of a complete street, Water Street in Henderson. See how wide that sidewalk is, see the street trees, there's on-street parking. And this is a road that was placed on a road diet. It used to have 5 lanes of traffic. It now has 1 lane of traffic each way with a median lane. A very comfortable, friendly road that I think is just a great example of complete streets design and practice. Another is Paseo Verde Parkway in Henderson. Notice the offset sidewalk and the raised median landscaping off to the left. Street trees. It's a great example of some elements of complete street design. Now, we have developed some draft, what do you call them, Fred, the schematics for how we would apply these cross-sections. They're too difficult to show you with the limitations of this system, but we're working those out with your public works directors and planning directors as we go forward for streets that are 80 feet wide, streets that are 100 feet wide, and streets that are 120 feet wide, like Sahara Avenue here. Sahara Avenue presents a particular challenge. This part of Commercial Center, there are no sidewalks on the south side of the street, and you can see we do have kind of the tunnel effect going with how wide this street is. But when we're done, with this project, which we're almost done with, is it's going to add a significant improvement in safety and traffic calming, as you can see in the next slide. And you've seen this before. We've got 10-foot wide sidewalks on both sides. We've got raised median, landscaped median, and street trees, and the dedicated transit lanes. We're very excited about the completion of this project. I know the community will be very excited when the construction is done in early February of this year. Fred? What's that? Did you hear that? An engineer who actually committed to a date? February the 17th? On time, under budget? Let's see what we've got next. Just another look of Sahara on the other side of the strip, on the other side of I-15, close to Valley View. This is the before, and this is the after. And it will take a couple of years for those street trees to mature, as you see that there, but we're very excited about the prospects for this. We really thank our partners at NDOT, Clark County, and the City of Las Vegas for their leadership and examples on this project. Now, we do have one of the latest innovations in pedestrian safety that will be going into the Sahara project. It is a mid-block street crossing just for pedestrians. It's called the Hawk Signal, high-activity, activated crosswalk. We're going to show you a video of that and why we think it's going to improve pedestrian safety, and you'll probably be seeing more of these signals as we go ahead and we rebuild our streets as we go forward with our Complete Streets policy. We have a number of policy recommendations for our Executive Advisory Committee to consider and for the Board to consider. We're planning on making RTC support for changes in codes and implementations into cities and the county development codes and into the design standards for streets that are appropriate to have complete streets elements, because not all streets are appropriate to have complete streets elements. Some streets by law are prohibited, such as freeways. And the context of some streets may mean that we would not want to consider them for complete streets treatments. But for many, we don't want to consider funding going forward for those streets unless the initial design shows that they have complete street elements in them. Here we go.
Fort Collins has a new kind of crossing signal. For the pedestrian, it's pretty much like any crosswalk. You push the button, wait for the walk signal, and cross. All the usual rules apply. Cross when the walk signal is on. Keep crossing when the don't walk signal is flashing. Don't enter the intersection when the don't walk light is solid. For the driver, it's a little different than the traditional crossing signal. For one thing, it's dark unless it's activated. Traditional crosswalk signals are often green for so much of the time that some drivers take them for granted and don't notice when the light turns red. The new pedestrian hybrid beacons only light up when a pedestrian is crossing, helping to draw attention to them. When someone pushes the walk button, the beacon starts flashing yellow, then goes solid yellow, then goes solid red, which means that the driver must stop at the line. After a time, the beacon goes to alternating flashing red. That means the driver has to come to a complete stop, but if there's no one in the crosswalk, cars can go. The first of several of these beacons has been installed at Harmony and Regency just west of Shields. Look for more of these beacons in the future.
Fred, where's this installation? 15th Street in Sahara? And that is part of this project that we're doing on Sahara. We think that will be a... We've also seen some significant improvements to the pedestrian safety in Boulder Highway with our Boulder Highway Express project and the Henderson Downtown Express project. This is during the construction of that project. Now that it's complete and operating, this is what it looks like. You can see the individual elements here. We'll highlight them in yellow for you. Dedicated bike lanes, dedicated bus lanes, landscaping, offset sidewalks, wider sidewalks. So we're pleased with how that's gone forward. We're also, for the future, we're looking forward to doing these types of treatments on a number of roads, Maryland Parkway, Flamingo, and also we're working in conjunction with the City of Las Vegas, if we can go to the next slide, on downtown Las Vegas pedestrian and bicycle improvements. The identified bike routes and lanes were selected based on their location and potential for increasing physical activity and active transport, and the RTC will focus on making pedestrian and bicycle improvements in downtown Las Vegas. The City of Las Vegas is investing in intersection improvements, including improved pedestrian crossings, enhanced landscaping and lighting, widened sidewalks, And we'll further those improvements with the addition of bike lanes, and those bike lanes will also have the green film that will be applied to them as well. And Commissioners, at this point in time, I think we've shown where we've been, what we're working on now, and where we're going for the future. But we're getting towards the end to where we can bring back this finalized or recommended final policy to you that will focus on complete streets in our infrastructure as we go forward. And we're very excited about the prospects for doing that. We also are holding a press conference this afternoon in conjunction with our efforts on complete streets with our other partners, the Public Works Departments and the Planning Departments. We've also invited law enforcement to come and express their concerns about driver behavior in response to the recent accidents that we've seen that involve automobiles and pedestrians. We'll have Aaron Breen from UNLV who will come and speak about what pedestrians and cyclists need to be concerned about and cognizant of so that they can be safe, because it involves all of these parties working together to improve safety. And that will be at 1:30 p.m. in room 108 of the RTC Administrative Building, which is on the bottom floor. With that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our staff presentation on the Complete Streets policy development and the Complete Streets study development. We hope to be able to bring back the study to make a final presentation to the Commission sometime in the spring of next year.
Thank you, Mr. Snow. Comments or questions? Councilwoman.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob, for this presentation. I think that this is such an important effort in our community, not only from the standpoint of health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, but also the quality of life of our community. And I think the fact that we can begin to make the streets safer for folks to be walking and bicycling and creating more options, and hopefully in the future creating more transit opportunities for folks as well is so important. And recently, Southern Nevada was the recipient of a HUD grant for sustainable communities, and clearly the Complete Streets initiative is going to be a very important part of this initiative for all of Southern Nevada. So I think that this is a great foundation, and thank you for the efforts on the RTC's behalf. So
that's a great point about the HUD grant. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Giunciliani.
Thank you. Great presentation, and I'm looking forward to seeing the final planning that comes out of this. I believe you also included safe routes to schools. You've been working with the school district as well to make sure that there's some coordination as far as what we're looking at on the bike lanes and the pathways, correct?
They're going to be at the press conference this
great.
afternoon.
And then I just have a couple of questions. The crosswalks, can we control them on state highways like Sahara, Charleston, and so forth? Or is it only freeways that we don't have jurisdiction? And I'm not sure, Susan, because it's kind of one of those weird things where it's those main thoroughfares are the states, but do we have the authority to look at crosswalks and where signage goes in, or do we have to go through NDOT?
You have to go through NDOT.
Okay.
That being said, if there's recommendations of where and approaches to do that, we definitely do work with you, and we'll. We have that great relationship, so we will continue with that. So
okay.
it's a partnership in that
And so
area.
part of the Complete Streets, just as an example, because for years before we did things like the changes to Sahara, but I'm thinking Charleston, Trop, we had crosswalks at weird places, or before buses really were even there. And so now we have conflicts in some places where you have an intersection, a crosswalk right in the middle of the thing, then another crosswalk, not signed in some cases. Many of them do not have flashing lights. And is part of this Complete Streets, we'll take a look at where we may need to eliminate some crosswalks so that we're not forcing that kind of a potential pedestrian crossing, and locating them where they really do need to be more safely. Is that part of what's included? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I noticed, I love the picture of the city of Las Vegas and the downtown, what they're doing, but could we flip the parking and the bike lanes before they do all that, or is that all completed?
I forgot to say, when we showed you that video of New York City, that we have solicited all of our entities to see who would be a candidate for a demonstration project where we would flip the bike lanes and the parking.
Dennis
And
had
we're-
indicated that we would be, so I'll see if maybe he still has that thought process.
That would be great. The idea is to start with some of our federal funding sources that
Right.
are eligible for this.
And then see how it goes and get that comfort level built up for some of the folks. So
Exactly.
it's a mind change. The green bike lanes, you're doing this in a project with City of Las Vegas. Are the other jurisdictions eligible to participate at some point? Or
They
is
are.
that a,
They are, and it's a decision that needs to be made by each jurisdiction, what
Okay.
their comfort level is with adding that color, and that includes NDOT as well.
okay. And then, is that the type of material that prospective, you can add it on current places, but is there a prospective better material that's used, or is it a maintenance issue or not? Because like in Europe, I took pictures for you, but I got to find where Gary put them, but they do the red bricking kind of, and that therefore it's also a different material, which I think somewhat you'll get a little, it's less slick and so on and so forth, so that you've got that. I like the green's fine too, because it promotes green cities in my opinion, but I just was curious if there's a maintenance issue that our folks are going to raise, which we get on the crosswalks as well. We don't paint them anymore. I guess it's a plastic type of a material, but it doesn't seem to last as long as the paint. So, Fred, do you know a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
at this point, we're trying to evaluate the city's test project on Bonneville.
Right.
And depends on how it performs, we may decide to tweak the material a little
Okay.
bit. So
And
it's
then-
more or less a test project at this point.
Okay.
And when completed, we'll
Just to kind of get an idea how long that lasts and
Correct.
before it wears off. And then in our streets, when I know our public works folks do it, but, and I know NDOT did it, are we using the quieter material for our city and highway streets? It's something they piloted in London years ago, and I think NDOT did it up on 95 in Henderson or something. But that really is a factor for quiet, and I think that should be part of our policy program as we move forward, because it's a quality of life issue. If you could get quieter as your traffic is going, and it's just by putting down a different type of a slurry seal, or a seal, I guess, on the groundwork. Yeah, it's a different material, and it's held up pretty well. I think, Susan, you guys have been very happy with it, so.
Yes, yes, we've had 2 locations, we're watching it, and it's part of that rubberized asphalt.
Yes.
And it uses recycled materials as well, so there's some big benefits. So we are looking at the durability and the constructability, and so far, so good.
Do we work with Phoenix Recycling, who's the only tire recycling company, do you know?
I
I know they
think
do the crumb
so,
rubber,
that-
but I don't know, okay.
Yes.
Because if we could do locals, that would be great, or create somebody else that might create another local job. Street trees, we adopted a new regional planning, as Mr. Planner, tree list, so palms aren't supposed to be there anymore, which you did not do, but you did in the
Sahara, we did.
Sahara thing.
Yeah.
You did shoestring acacias, I believe, and chase trees. But palms we did over here by the,
Grand Central.
yeah,
Park.
Grand Central. So, let's see, narrowing by, so you're going to, I love roundabouts. I mean, I know people don't, but they really are good traffic calming. I mean, I think a tree line in Hollywood and some of those streets that are just like speeding highways, that there would be some very good places that maybe we should be taking a look at down the road as we're looking at traffic calming and pedestrian issues. But the main thing is, I was teasing Bobby, when I used to drive to school, I used to do the carry, but they never broke your line of sight. You absolutely, on a roundabout, have to break the line of sight, because people just don't think about it, and that's when you get people that kind of make a mess. And it could be simply a planter or something. Bobby says they're redoing those anyway. And can we look at doing PSAs maybe, or if they even still do those, or on Channel 2 and 4, just reminding people about what the new bike laws are, reminding people not to ride on sidewalks, just maybe take a look in conjunction with some of the local governments, and then take the pedestrian thing. I learned a few things reading Adrienne Parker the other day on, on when you can go through and when you can't go through, and when you can turn and when you can't turn, and those types of things. So maybe we all need to refresh our course, because it's been a long time since I've taken driver's ed as far as that's concerned. So maybe just taking a look at that, Mr. Chair, as just a kind of from the RTC's perspective. So just some thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Martinovich?
Thank you. I just would like to emphasize and compliment the RTC's support in what we've been trying to do, is that it's a change of culture for a lot of our engineers and in planners in the past. And so we've invited Jacob and his staff and Washoe County RTC and their staff, because they are also looking at the same thing, to give workshops on what can be done. And so thank you very much for the information, because we do want to coordinate and be partners with what you all are doing. And Jacob mentioned it, and I would just want to reemphasize, is that there is data to support that calming does not reduce capacity, that we can still get vehicles through because, as Jacob mentioned, they're not stopping as often, and they're still moving. And so there are tremendous benefits, but there actually is data. I know that in Washoe County, they changed one of their local streets and actually did the study. It was on Wells Avenue, which showed that the businesses were increased because people were able to get there in and out, and that they were still able to get the volume of vehicles through. So it doesn't necessarily mean reduction, just something different. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilwoman.
I just wanted to commend everybody where you're all working together. I've been watching this project as it's been developing. We were able to get a grant through the city for 2.3 million, through the NDOT for 2.3 million, and we've been working on Valley View and the Safe Walks to School. And everybody seems to have come together so that if we have a project, we know you're going to have a project, we measure together to reach these goals that we have, which I think are very important. And we weren't doing that before. And our citizens would be saying, well, you have this project, and then you're done with that, and, dig up again and do another project. You've all been working together. I think it's magnificent, and I think it's magnificent that we're doing this with a concentration on the safety, too. I have one question, and that is, on our Safe Walks to School grant, we increased the sidewalks to 10 feet to make them multi-use sidewalks, which would include bicyclists, right?
By statute, cyclists are not allowed to ride their bicycles on sidewalk. So it's really designed primarily for pedestrians, for larger volumes of pedestrians, and for people to be able to walk abreast, 2 abreast or 3 abreast, so they can carry on a conversation as they do so. But bicycles are prevented by law from being ridden on the sidewalk.
So these people that are building the 10-foot sidewalks, they better start looking at that problem. If you can't do that, unless you could take part of the sidewalk and designate it for bikes. Because the Safe Walk, I know the Safe Walks to Schools in Valley View between Alta and close to Charleston has been increased to 10 feet, and that's what it was for, safety for the kids, it's so they would ride their bikes.
If we provide wider sidewalks, we may just be inviting more people to ride their bikes on those sidewalks. But we don't design them that way, because by statute we can't do that. And many families will encourage their children to ride their bikes on a wider sidewalk, but we don't want to have bicycle and pedestrian conflicts, and that's why the law states that they're not allowed to ride on the sidewalks. Practical matter, I think it's going to be an enforcement issue which is very difficult to enforce.
No, I know it's a problem down there in California, the beach areas. You really, you've got the people on roller skates, you've got the bicyclists, and sometimes it is a safety issue even there. I'm just going to go back to the city, because we've approved this and done this through Jorge in Public Works, and I just don't want to do something that we think we're doing right and spending the money on it, and it's something that we can't do. So thank you for that information. And again, it's wonderful everybody working together. Even the school district has helped us in expanding, giving us some of their unused playground area, Chris, and using that. So thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner?
Just to clarify, 'cause we were just talking, I was trying to pull it up on NRS. With the new 3-foot rule, is there also a requirement that if you're on a bike and there is a bike lane, that you ride in the bike lane? Because you still have bicyclists in some cases who still go into the actual traffic, which then they should be made to have to, if there's a bike lane present, and if not, maybe we should look statutorily or add that to our little to-do list to take a look at clearing up. Because a bicycle is a vehicle. That's why they're not allowed on sidewalks, and they are to ride with the flow of traffic. So do you know, Jacob, offhand? I was trying to pull up the language.
I have a hunch that it doesn't include that.
Probably
But
doesn't.
I would not want to say for certain that it does
Okay.
without checking.
Okay, if you would, and then maybe we can
Yes.
come back and at least discuss the pros and cons of that, but we might want to tweak that, because you would know, you're a bicyclist, you really shouldn't be in the traffic if you don't need to be in the traffic, if that's the case.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If there's a bike lane, I'm going to be in the bike lane.
Bike lane, okay. So that might-
Thank you. Jacob, just a couple things. Statistically, you put up the map that indicated where the fatalities had taken place. If you could break that down, I don't know if that's our information or culmination, but I'd be interested to see as far as, you know, the Strip, some of our Boulder Highway, some of our major arterials versus some of the others. If we could do that.
Absolutely.
Also, what came to mind when you were showing some of the land planning issues in the Northwest, the West, you have some real good examples, Summerlin, Pecole, some of the relatively newer master plan communities that have a little bit more open space, walkability, sidewalk separations. And although I don't anticipate any major activity in new building, we're primarily focusing then on retrofitting some of our older areas and some of our older streetscapes. Is that the plan?
It's actually both. This policy would apply to new development when it comes, and it would also apply to, where appropriate, in corridors where we deem it appropriate to go through and retrofit. So it's new and old.
And are we targeting, like the Sahara project and the next project, the third project, the fourth project? Are we starting to identify those major arterials that we can convert to the safe street?
Yes, and part of our policy will be that we will come up with a methodology to prioritize the order of the implementation. That's part of the study as well.
And a lot of the pictures that were shown, New York City, Portland, some of these streetscapes, I noticed that they all have mid to high-rise activity along the corridors. So that's not so much from a transportation standpoint, but from a land use standpoint. We've been at it for 20, 25 years through this growth period, and it's almost heresy when you talk about going beyond a single story. A two-story or three-story apartment complex, or condo even, gets a lot of resistance because of this Western culture that flat layout. So those are extremely effective, but I think you also have that urban component where I don't think the community as a whole in Southern Nevada has embraced that yet. So there's a little bit of a conflict there, because some of those streetscapes don't work if you're out perhaps in the R&P area.
Absolutely. And I apologize for any misperception. We're not suggesting that we need to adopt a Portland land use plan. What we are suggesting is that the principles that are adopted in there and the connectivity, so making it so that if there are block walls that are built, that there are fences or gaps in the block wall that allow the pedestrian connectivity and the bicycle connectivity to take place, even if it's there. The principles can be applied in a number of different land use scenarios, but we need to have the connectivity.
And I'm not implying that we'll never get there, because I think there's some great examples of where we're starting to see higher density, even the downtown area. I think that has become somewhat of a model for all these street improvements, because they have some of that density down there.
That's really why you see a number of the examples we showed were of downtown, including the land use in downtown with the short blocks and the tight turns.
Okay. And finally, if someone mentioned as far as the PSAs, not only our respective public agencies, but if the RTC does that, also the pedestrian aspect of this, I think, needs to be emphasized almost as much as the vehicular safety issue. And I'm sure there's principles of safe pedestrian activity that I think needs to be raised, because although it's tragic whenever something like this happens, there are, at least in recent times, there are activities where the driver was not at fault. You don't want to blame the pedestrian. It's just a tragedy. But I think if we raise the awareness on the vehicular side, the driver's side, we should also bring up that pedestrian side also.
Well, the gentleman who produced our last public service announcement is right here, and we can add that to his job description along with Glenn Levitt. And
we have some great supporting actors here at the RTC. Okay. Excellent report. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. If there are no other questions or comments, we'll move to the Administration and Finance portion of our agenda.
Do you want, I'm sorry, Jake, do you want a motion to accept? It says for possible action.
We really were just giving a report of our draft study at this point, and but we're open to whatever direction. And the Commission has given us some direction on working on public service announcements and evaluating roundabouts and bicycle and pedestrian emphases. So
Okay.
we've got that for the record. Thank you.
you.
The Administration and Finance portion of your agenda, item 39, the RTC General Counsel, Zev Kaplan, will handle this item.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, item 39 is to approve the settlement agreement to resolve the lawsuit between First Transit and the RTC, case number A11-646931C, and authorize council to sign the settlement agreement. As you know, at our last board meeting, we discussed in closed session the proposed settlement from First Transit to resolve the litigation and the procurement issues that were outstanding that we've all been struggling with for the past, I don't know, 9 months. And at that time, in our closed session, we discussed that. You came back out and gave direction to move forward with reaching the settlement agreement. The proposed agreement that's here as the backup actually encompasses all those issues that we addressed. First off, First Transit would agree to dismiss the lawsuit. The parties would mutually pay all their own costs and fees related to it. The RTC didn't incur any. First Transit will cover all those. You would agree, as had been discussed previously, to exercise the option on that exists in the current First Transit paratransit services contract for 2 years at the new proposed lower rates that First Transit provided to the RTC. You would also agree to cancel the existing procurement that's out there and re-procure fixed route services, which would commence almost immediately. There's some follow-on items on this agenda which would address both the exercise of the option of paratransit and the cancellation and direction for re-procurement. And as part of the settlement agreement, First Transit had asked for some kind of a letter explaining how this all came about factually. That has also been attached. And it would you would be authorizing Mr. Snow as the general manager to sign that letter to be provided to First Transit. So with that, unless there's any questions, the recommendation is to approve this settlement and mutual release agreement between the parties.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Commissioner.
Thank you. I believe the letter that we had in the backup just had a few tweaks made to it. Is there anything changed in the letter itself that Jacob's being asked to sign that's anything of substance?
No, there were the settlement agreement itself had 2 minor tweaks that the chairman had asked for. They're not substantive. One was to correct a factual issue in one paragraph because the chairman was actually not present at the settlement discussion meeting. Not that one.
Right.
He'd been present in numerous
at the
others.
previous one.
Right. Yeah. And so that was corrected. And then there was some clarification in just wording in another paragraph, a factual recitation, and that's been clarified as well.
Okay, good.
But none of those are substantive changes.
Okay, thank you. Do you need a motion, Mr. Chair?
Entertain a motion.
So move.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Your next item is item 40, which is to approve Amendment Number 4 to the contract between the RTC and First Transit Incorporated for specialized services, which is your paratransit services contract, and authorize the chairman to sign. Now, this is part of the settlement agreement that was previously discussed by Mr. Kaplan. The total contract savings for the period of July 1st through 2012 through June 30th, 2014 are estimated at $1,722,600, or a 2.5% reduction. That's based on a letter that we received from First Transit willing to lower the price by the amount indicated. And this item requests the approval of option period 2 in the current contract, and as I said, it will go from July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2014, and it does include the service rate reductions proposed by First Transit, and staff recommends approval.
Very good. Comments or questions? Entertain a motion. Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Item 41 is to cancel request for proposals number 11-029, operations and maintenance of fixed route transit services, and direct staff to develop a revised request for proposals for board review and approval and take any additional action as appropriate. As a result of the agreed-upon litigation settlement, the RTC has directed that staff prepare an item to cancel request for proposals for the current 11-029 fixed route operations and maintenance contract, and RTC staff is also seeking approval to proceed with the development of a revised RFP document splitting the fixed route transit services into 2 contracts and to avoid a monopoly on the fixed route services contract whereby no one company can be awarded both contracts. This is per the settlement agreement. Staff intends to bring the RFP documents to the board for review and approval at a future meeting date, and we also will be seeking a direction on how to structure such an RFP in the next agenda item that we will hear following this one. And staff recommends approval of the cancellation of this RFP.
Comments or questions from the board? Commissioner?
Thank you. Is this the time when we have to talk about what suggestions to give with regard, or this is just to?
That will be the next.
Okay, that'll be the next one. Okay, then I'll move approval on this.
There's a
item.
motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Item 42 is to receive a report on reprocurement considerations for the operations and maintenance of fixed route transit services and direct staff accordingly. Now, at the last meeting, you directed us to come back with an item to discuss how this new RFP could be structured, and I have some options to discuss with the Commission, and we can go to that PowerPoint presentation. We'll make it a little bit clearer on the types of direction that the Commission could give on the structure. Now, as part of the settlement agreement, we're proposing, and it was proposed, that the contract for fixed route transit operations and vehicle maintenance be split, and we'd like to show you how we would propose to split the contract. The procurement, if we can go to the next slide, the procurement for fixed route services would involve securing 2 contractors to provide the service, and the service would be split geographically. Here you see a picture of your north maintenance facility. We refer to it as the IBMF. That's a government name. It stands for Integrated Bus Maintenance Facility. We came up with that term to help get federal funding for it, and we did get federal funding, but it's out in North Las Vegas, very close to the North Las Vegas airport. And essentially, if we split the contract geographically, one contractor would operate out of the Integrated Bus Maintenance Facility in North Las Vegas, and the other contractor would operate out of the Southern Maintenance Facility. This is your Sunset Maintenance Facility down at, we call it Sunset Maintenance Facility because its actual address is on Russell Road. The approximate location is at the Bruce Woodbury Beltway and Decatur in the southwest part of the valley. So we have 2 garages, one in the north and one in the south. And so we'd split the contract geographically. And that would likely result in an additional 4,700 service hours of deadhead operation, and will result in additional administrative overhead requirements on RTC staff. But we think that this is the right direction to move in. In terms of the term of the contract and where we'd like direction from the Commission is how long these contracts should last, and we have a recommendation for you that's up on the screen. The trend in the industry is to enter into longer-term contracts because you can get better costs and save money, and so we're hopeful that that will be possible. We would propose that contract number 1 go for an initial term of 5 years with a 5-year option for a period of 10 years, and that contract number 2 go for a period of 4 years with 2 4-year option terms. We want to stagger these so that we're not reprocuring both contracts at the same time. And that would be our recommendation for how you could structure the term of the contract. But of course, if you have other recommendations or other ideas in mind, we're certainly open to those. Now, we have discussed in the past some options for how we could go forward for soliciting input from private sector firms. What we have done is called a value-based procurement or a traditional RFP. And the traditional RFP involves establishing weighted factors for technical criteria and price before the RFP is issued. It's what we've always done. There's also the option that's been suggested by some board members and our general counsel that we could go to a two-step bid process, and this is not unusual in the industry, where the first step would be we would pre-qualify contractors. And based upon the last industry review that we did and what has been the result of some additional consolidation in the industry worldwide, it appears that if we were to split into two, that we might have up to half a dozen contractors that would be qualified. And once we would qualify contractors, we'd recommend those firms and bring them back to the commission, and then the qualified firms would submit a price, and the lowest cost bid wins. It's fairly straightforward. So we'd like some input from the commission at this time on if you want to continue with the traditional value-based procurement, or if you'd like to go to a two-step bid process. Let's go to the next slide, please. The next question would be, who evaluates these submittals if we have, if we stay with the traditional value-based procurement? Now, the options that you have here are essentially the board has and it has always had the option to be the evaluators. And we apologize to Councilman Hafen, but this is the most current picture of all the board together that we had, with Councilman Bennett on the screen. But so the board can participate if they want to elect to participate in the evaluation process, or we can go to a different model, which is the model that we've done in the past, which is to have the staff do it. When we say cross-functional staff, we've had staff from our finance department, staff from our transit department, staff from our maintenance department, and other departments participate in the evaluation process. Or you also have the option of going out and hiring consultants who are private industry experts in public transportation, or you can hire academic experts who have some expertise and considerable expertise in these matters, or you can go with a combination of any of the previous three: staff, consultants, RTC, commissioners. It's up to the board to decide on the approach that they want to take and the direction they want to give staff. We can go to the next slide, please. I do have a recommendation, however. I'd like to, on the term, 5 and 5 for the first contract and 4, 4, and 4 for the second contract. We're open to the direction the board wants to give on the board approval requirements. We'd like to hear from you on that. We can go to the next slide, please. With regard to the board approval requirements, this is how, if you decide to go with a traditional RFP, this is how we have structured the weighting between the technical qualifications and price. In 2008, we had price was 30% of the weight, and 70% of the weight went to technical factors. And in 2010, we had 45% of the weight went to technical factors and 55% went to price. Due to the fact that we are already preparing to bring back to this board, likely next month or the month following, a 60,000 service hour reduction in our fixed route contract because of we continue to struggle with the economy. I would encourage the board to continue to have price be a significant factor in the overall weighting, but that is up to the board. So we'd like direction on possible evaluators as well, the board, the staff, or consultants, or a mixture of the three. And that's essentially what we have for the board to consider. And we'd be happy to go over those one by one if you'd like to deliberate on those one by one, Mr. Chairman, or members of the commission.
The sense of the board, one by one?
Let's go back. Let's go back on some of those slides then. Unfortunately, we've exited out of the presentation, but we can just start with the contract term, which is what I started with. And my recommendation to you was for the first contract, for one contract to be 5 years with a 5-year option, and the second contract to be 4, 4, and 4. And I don't know if the board has any other direction you'd like to provide.
I had a question, and then I'll open it up to the board. The reference to the FTA, now, in prior years, they did not want anything past 5 years.
Yeah, there used to be a rule that limited contracts to 5 years, the length of the contract. That rule has been rescinded by the FTA, so you can have longer-term contracts now. It's a discretion, what is in the best interest of the community as determined by the local policymakers.
And this indicates that the industry is moving towards 10 years or more?
That's what we're seeing. That's the trend now. I think everyone thinks the stability, and also it's easier for these private contractors to give you better pricing when they have a more secure contract for a longer time. They can amortize their costs over that longer period.
Okay. Open it up for the board. Commissioner June Kiliani?
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. So I think I'm inclined to say, okay, the 5 and 5, 4, 4 and 4, but then one gets 2 years more. Does that become an issue?
Commissioner, related to some of this and how I think the staff came up with the recommendation is it's going to be virtually impossible to split this equally 50-50.
Right.
So some of the thinking was perhaps the one company that gets the smaller revenue maybe gets the longer-term contract to try and equalize
So they can
things.
amortize it better
Yeah,
for
yeah.
their purposes. And then would we make sure, I mean, if somebody was not performing, we would have additional language to be able to get out of any of these, correct?
That's correct. You can always do that. We have that now, but obviously we would try and strengthen that.
I think we need to strengthen that and also look at a transition clause, and we may have one, but I don't know for
And-
sure what that might be. So
Right,
that might be
and-
something to tighten up as well as we look at our
And
contract.
Another part of the rationale with when having the two is you have another contractor already here in place. So as an interim step, you could transition, have them on an interim basis while you're reprocuring if there's a problem with one of the contractors on an interim basis, and we can incorporate that in each contract where they could be called upon to step in during a reprocurement.
Okay. And then we're probably not on this part, but I don't want to skip the split contract geographically versus the 2 maintenance yards. Is it okay if I ask a question on that? Or do you want to come back to that at a different time? Because that preceded this one, so I wasn't sure. Because
We'll come back.
Okay.
We'll go from the term of the contract
back
backwards
to
to
that.
the
Okay,
multiple.
all right, thank you.
Other comments on this component? All right, seems to be the direction of the board to follow that recommendation.
I think direction can suffice.
Yeah,
Zev?
direction would suffice, because I believe we'll probably bring back the final draft of the RFP anyway to make sure it's consistent with your wishes before we put it out.
Okay, thank you. So let us move backwards, Jacob, for the multiple providers and have some dialogue there. Commissioner G?
Thank you. That just makes sense to me, but I want to make sure that we don't, does that then mean one company automatically is going to get the full strip, which is where you make your money? And we should recognize that if that is the result of doing it in this geographic way.
At this point, it's the RTC that makes the money since we keep all the fare box revenue.
Okay.
And it does both routes on the strip generate a sizable revenue surplus, and we use that to subsidize the rest of the
So
system.
it may not be exactly profitable for both companies as well as RTC, but not necessarily overweigh one group or another, or
I
not?
think in how we would propose to the commission to divide these services, we would include both strip routes as part of one contract, because they don't lend themselves to being split at all.
Okay, but then they would know that and then know what the cost, benefit, or impact could be, because that's a more profitable, including for us, but that's also where I think some of the company probably makes their offset.
Commissioner, if I could, I think from the RTC's perspective, the cost will remain the same to the RTC because it's based on the service hour rates. One contractor may have slightly different costs to the RTC and their rate structure because of the different costs for providing the service based on which routes they're providing. Right, and possibly the costs of operating out of that maintenance facility.
Okay.
So we may not get the exact same rates from each contractor that we
Okay.
have, but from the RTC's perspective, it doesn't matter if certain routes are more profitable than the others. We're going to pay whatever the contract rate is.
So then so 6 companies, whatever way we go, could bid on both, but recognize that one may have a different cost per service hour versus the other based on the type. Okay.
Correct.
All right. As long as that's equitable in that way. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
We would assign our vehicle fleet to specific contracts, and the specific vehicles have different operating costs, and that's transparent to whoever would propose. I think now we can go to the options for the solicitation process. I believe that's next. And that's where you could discuss the merits, the costs and benefits, or the pros and cons of a traditional RFP versus a two-step bid process.
Comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Ross.
I just want the board to recognize I support either method of putting this out on the street. Just want it out on the street.
Commissioner June Kiliani?
Thank you. I think either one would work, but I do think it's time to look at a two-step bid because we're entering into trying to break up a monopoly but then not create other future problems. And in the two-step, because you do pre-qual, which is what we're using quite a bit in our bidding processes in the local governments, at least you know up front, you may have 15 companies, but only 7 really know. I mean, that's what we're running into even just with folks who, because of the construction industry, they never built a building. They were always doing houses, and now they're getting in, and they don't really have that expertise necessarily. So I think the two-step could lend itself at least a little bit better scrutiny on that. My only concern would be on the low bid, where does our maintenance factor come in? Where do innovations come in? Things that we found or accidentally or intentionally or whatever in the previous bids that were out there that I think are important and not just going straight low bid. Are we required to have to take lowest bidder in this case?
In this case, there may be some things that you can do as part of the qualifications of contractors, especially when it comes to maintenance.
To me, that's because that's our fleet, and that has a cost impact on us if we don't make sure that we have somebody that's got the right qualifications and dedicated revenue and so on and so forth to that part. So that you think could be outlined?
It would have to be outlined in the qualifications process. Zeb, do you want to speak to anything about that?
Yeah, I'd agree with Jacob. Once you get to, if it's going to be a pre-qualification and then just a bid, then it's going to be the actual final determination will be purely price. So you're going to have to put all the other factors you want in the first step where you qualify. Just thinking off the top of my head, there may be a way based on how you score that people get some bonus, percentage bonus or something to offset some of the pricing if you think certain factors may be more important. I mean, I've talked to procurement people. It would seem to me that may be a possibility. We have in state law certain instances where you do get certain percentage benefits from related to your price as well for certain factors. With regard to innovative matters, those can be priced for the most part. And if they think, for instance, on the last go-round, one of the proponents said they could offer some guaranteed amount, but then they didn't put it in their price. They could have built that into the price, and so if someone wants to do that, they can put it in their price. And there's also there wouldn't be a restriction on someone giving us alternative proposals, one with something with an innovative pricing that they build in and one without. One would be
standard, one could be enhanced or something along those lines then. And I would think we would want to encourage that because transportation's changing and I want to make sure that any company that comes in has full health insurance and other quality of standards for their employees, those types of things that make a difference, because I don't want them having to come to UMC and then we have to pay for it out of a different taxpayer bank as far as that's concerned. So I think maintenance is very, very key, though, to whatever we're going to do with regarding the bidding part. But let me just clarify, are we required to have to do a low bid, the lowest bid? Or is that our choice still on how we want to do that?
No, that's your choice.
Okay. Because there wasn't an additional option where we could take it based on percentages or rankings or something along those lines. I'll wait to hear from some of the other board members. Those were just...
Commissioner, that's still what is number one on here, the traditional request, and then you decide what the weighting would be between the technical criteria and the pricing. You can have pricing be, like last time, be more than 50% if you think pricing is important, and still do it in the traditional methodology. It's and rather than just purely on price. I mean,
Right,
that's,
you could
that's
do
a policy decision. of the
Exactly.
board.
You could do a pre-qual and low bid, and in the pre-qual list include X, Y, Z, and then allow enhanced bids. You could do a pre-qual with weighted technical and pricing data, and then we would give you direction, say it's 25, 25, 25, and 25, or something along those lines. So, but that, all we had was low bid, and I wasn't sure if we were required to have to go low
Right,
bid.
and,
so.
and really what you're talking about is somewhat similar to what's the traditional methodology, where you go through and you, on the technical score and the pricing score, the total score, and you figure who can move forward to the BAFO
Right.
round. It's similar to that, a little different, but somewhat similar in concept.
Yeah, I just think this is
So
an
you-
opportunity for us to get it right this time. So anyway, I'd like to hear some other thoughts. I just was trying to get a handle on that part.
Councilwoman.
Thank you, Chairman. Could we look at the two-step being, the first step is just to pre-qualify, determine that they are qualified like the BAFO system, but then do value procurement in the second step? Is that?
You can certainly do that. There's nothing that precludes that.
So the first step would be, yes, you qualify because you have all of the qualities we're looking for, and then the second step would be the actual bid process?
Yeah, you can certainly do that. The reality is, as Jacob noted, there's probably somewhere between 4 and 6 companies that may propose. I mean, we have no assurance who will, but certainly I think we know 2 and probably 3. There's a good chance that there's 2 newer companies who are now part of very large multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies. Also, we may see proposals from who would certainly be qualified now that weren't before. So I don't know that you'd see some mom and pop come in here. They wouldn't score very well in the technical scoring anyway. So it may just delay things by doing a pre-qualification if you want to stick with the traditional approach.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kaplan, I agree. If it's 2 or maybe 4 or even 5, that pre-qual is almost a given.
Right.
If they're going to get into the system, there's a good chance that they'll qualify regardless of the criteria we set up. So I don't want to just do that pre-qual and go right to low bid. I'm certainly opposed to that. So whether it's a hybrid of what we've traditionally done with the traditional RFP, that pre-qual is going to give us 2, 3, 4 excellent companies, and I think that next step is where I'd like to focus the specifics as far as the evaluation. Councilman Ross?
Thank you. Director Martinovich shared some thoughts with me here I'd like to share get a better clarification. Statement was made that one firm will not get both. We already have established that. What happens if one firm is the low bidder on both? How is that going to be clarified in the bid process? And if so, if they rank number 1 on both, what are we going to do? So has it got to be clear in the bid process, regardless of which route we take, the traditional request for RFPs or a 2-step process?
It was going to be it needs to be spelled out up front in the procurement document that regardless of whether you give the best scored or the best price, whichever approach you take, that you cannot win both. One would go to you, and one would then go to the number 2 ranked firm.
How are you going to restrict any of the firms from bidding both? Or are you just going to say, firm A, if you want to bid this one or this one, pick one?
Well, that's one approach, or you can let them bid both and just say you can only be awarded one, and the selection process will go to the number 2 for the other.
It's a good question. In the responses, if they're bidding on both, and if that scenario plays out, somewhere in that response, there's a scenario that if Company X wins both contracts, they must designate on their response which is their priority.
Yes.
But that's a great scenario.
Right.
And that would eliminate
But
the second.
then also, if they get both, they back out of one of them, then you have to go to the next bidder, then your prices are going to be higher than what we anticipated.
Thus, the competitive nature of what we're doing.
That's what I'm saying. So the monopoly thing is kind of interesting.
Mayor Tobler?
You kind of talked about it. It sounds like what's been discussed, they still want to have a weighted, put different emphasis on different areas. So that would be more the traditional request. I don't mind going that route. Jacob, I don't know if you gave us a recommendation before. Does your staff really recommend one over the other on this? Or I still think it needs to be weighted heavily on the low bid price if we do the traditional, though.
We have, you know, we're most familiar with the traditional process. The traditional process takes more work and it takes longer. But for example, if we were to be putting the paratransit contract out, we would have recommended we stay with the traditional value-based procurement just because of the sensitive nature of the clientele. I think that particular method of procurement is best for paratransit. In the industry, both of these options are valid and widely used. I wouldn't say one, maybe the traditional value-based procurement is used more than the bid, but they're both valid ways that can be approached, and there are pros and cons to each. We don't have a strong recommendation one way. If you had to pin us down and say, what do you want to do, we'd probably say we would go with what we're most familiar with. But there may be we may go the other way and find out that it's a better way to go.
Councilman Haven.
You may find out it's smoother the other way. We might not, if we go the two-step process, and that's the concern I have. The question, I had the same question that was brought up of the election with the bidders, which one they select. If they both win it, then we get into a situation where we're down to technicalities of how it was scored if we're back to the traditional way of how it's been done in the past. I just want to avoid the 9 months of the circus we've had in the past. If these things are specified up front, all the bidders understand, you know, they have to outline which one they select. If they're successful on both of them, which one they choose, we go to the next bidder. You know, I prefer the low bid. I mean, I think it just makes it cleaner across the board with what we're trying to accomplish. As long as the qualifications, everybody understands we want the innovative measures of cost savings and all the things that I think that everybody that's sat in this room for the last 9 months understands where we're going with this thing. I just think it's a cleaner, less likely for legal scrutiny and those kind of things to go forward.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I know if we talk about only one company gets one, I know that in doing some of the research on at least the two we've been dealing with, in some cities they do split contracts or shared contracts. Would that be prohibited or encouraged or not allowed?
I'm sorry, could you?
Shared contracts? They do, I think in some cities, if I remember from my notes from back when, that some of these companies have entered in those types of contracts. Would that be prohibited based on whatever policy or not? I don't know.
So a scenario, company X and Y combine their proposals and win both.
That's a policy call you have to make.
Was that the scenario?
That's kind of the scenario. We just should know all possibilities that may come up because there's not that many companies that could participate, like you're saying, 4 to 6. So we should recognize whether or not there might be another hybrid, so to speak, of what could participate or what we could get and receive back. Low bid's always the easiest, but I know that the years I've spent in the legislature, we were always trying to get at more of a responsive and responsible bidder rather than just going for the easy way. So I don't know. I go back and forth on this one. I don't know that I've landed anywhere, but I do think that there's something that talks to value, customer service, maintaining our fleet that we've paid for, making sure the employees are properly compensated and so forth, and looking at innovations. And I don't know that you can necessarily drive that out in a low bid contract. But I would like to hear more about that because I haven't landed necessarily any place.
I'd just like to point out, I think initially when we put this on for this meeting, the intent was to introduce all this to you, maybe get some decisions. We can bring it back the January meeting for final determination on some of these issues. That would still give us adequate time to craft the procurement document and get it out on the street in a reasonable amount of time. So if you're not comfortable yet with some of these decisions, we can bring it back in January.
Councilwoman?
I'm just not sure we can predict everything and all the tactics that might come into play as we get down the road. So I think it's important for us to create a system that we are comfortable with, but then some of it will be worked out as we go forward with the evaluation process.
I would also point out in the normal procurement process, we would have a pre-proposal meeting. Depending on the input we get from people, we can modify the document at that point. If some of these other issues were to come up, come back to you and say, hey, we think this is maybe another approach that should be considered or included.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilwoman Tarkanian?
Where's he going next? I'll go after him.
Please.
Women first, go right ahead.
Oh, the only time we get a good deal, I think. I wanted to ask you, again, with some information coming from NDOT, would it be possible for two companies to work together to get the shared contract where you're asking, would this be legal or would this be such and such? Could two companies themselves decide we will work together on this and share a contract and then make that as a shared bid like?
Yeah, there'd be no prohibition from a joint venture proposal from any companies. It leads to the issue of whether you then have another contractor, because they'd be the equivalent of one contractor then.
So if you go into the shared, that's what my concern was, would it still be then you're considering it one contractor even though it's just two companies?
Yes.
I mean, it's two separate companies.
That's the way I would ordinarily consider it. It's one proposal, as though it's one company.
Or one of the other two.
Right, right.
If the board wanted to direct that that could not happen, then that's up to the board. The board could specify if you wanted to allow companies to combine and serve as one.
Comment on that,
And
Mr.
I'm
Chairman.
glad that you're saying that you're presenting this now for us to think over and look at other resource information, because that helps a lot. I have experienced the same thing on the school board that Chris is talking about. When you come and they say you have to take the lowest bidder, many times we were forced to take a bidder because the price was the lowest, even though we knew it wasn't the best value bid for the school district.
One of the directions you could take is you could follow the traditional value-based procurement and let the best and final offer that comes from that process serve as the low bid. That way you essentially specify what's important to you up front, and then you get the lowest cost, and you go with the lowest cost.
I like that idea.
The concern and I guess I'll express it, I can go either way. Like Chris says, I haven't landed either. But the monopoly issue is really a concern to me, because if we put that where they can't have a monopoly, we have a possibility of messing with our constituents, because if we have to go to the next bidder, they're higher than the low bidder, haven't planned for it, we have to start cutting service hours, then we have to, we go down that road, and puts us in that arena there where we're cutting service hours because we didn't plan on that other high bidder. I mean, I know the concern about the monopoly, but yet we need to remember who we're serving.
So on that specific point, Mr. Kaplan, if you could kind of flush that out as far as legally or options for the board. I was just thinking and hearing some of the comments. It might not be X and Y on both. It could be X, Y on the first contract and XZ on the second one. So then you're going to start getting into percentages, and let's kind of flush that one out. Other comments?
Can I make a comment?
Councilman Ross?
In regards to Councilwoman and Susan's thought on what the private sector does, I don't want to stymie what the private sector does by going forward with this. Let them do whatever they want. If they come to us as a joint venture, or three of them gang up on each other and want to give us the best price and the best value and the best service for our customers, let them do it. I don't think we should restrict what the private sector does. Let them do what they want to do, and we'll evaluate as they come in, I think. I just want to share my thoughts with you.
Good. Mayor Tobler.
Well, I kind of liked what Mr. Snow said about doing the traditional and then come back with the best and final offer as the determination. I think that would kind of resolve everyone's issues with wanting to weight certain things a certain way, but at the end of the day, they're qualified, and then you still come back with the best offer.
And I think the board will be better informed going in, at least speaking for myself, on what we are going to be looking at. I think that's an important distinction, and Councilman Hafen brought up that key price issue. I don't have any problems with the weighting of that price, but also the suggestion allows for some of the private sector innovation, and I think you're getting some direction.
Could you maybe distill what direction you think we're getting, Mr. Chairman?
It's funneling down here. Well, I'll put a little direction out and then jump on board. I think the board is looking at the traditional RFP with some new caveats. One, as Mayor Tobler said, at the end of the day, that best and final offer will be certainly price-driven or heavily weighted. We certainly want private sector innovation, creativity to weigh into this, especially if there's investments or guarantees in that innovation that would best suit the RTC and the citizens. I'm listening. I'm open.
I would agree that that makes good sense. And I think it gives us something to come back and finalize in January. But I would hope that maybe, and I know it's the holidays, but if we can get even a 1 or 2 pager to recap what possibilities we've been discussing, so at least we're focusing on that, that might help.
I'd like to see some staff recommendations as far as the weighted criteria.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful for
Yeah.
the board. And I would encourage the board, despite the holidays, Zeb, are we okay to interact individually with staff?
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Well, I would encourage that over the next few weeks, because we are pressed a little bit for time, and we don't want to be February, March, still having this conversation. So anything the board can do to interact with staff and provide insight, opinions, thoughts would be appreciated.
We could come back with some specific recommendations on the options for how to structure this at your January
Okay.
meeting based on the feedback we've received.
And then if I could just clarify, because we're still on this part of it, on the past procurement options for weighted, 2008, 70% was on technical, 30% on price. 2010, technical was 45, price was 55. What had it been prior to 2008? Do you know offhand?
It had always been the
Technical?
70-30, yes.
And so as you come back with some thoughts, I know price is absolutely key because we want to keep the rates down as best as we can for our folks while maintaining everything. But to me, customer service and making sure that's all part of the piece. So I would hope that you'd look at that percentage. And if that's what the chairman was asking, then that makes good sense. And then we have just what the possible evaluations next. Is that okay? Thank you.
One last comment that I'll put in, and Jacob, I'll leave this up to staff. If there's a component of the process that when price is provided, that we, staff, have the opportunity to verify the feasibility, the viability. So we're not at the last minute trying to have a Jeremy Aguero say, is this true or is this false, and have the assumptions made. If there's a way we can solidify that price component and say that these are real numbers, they're guaranteed, this is what's going to do. Not that it didn't happen, but I think that on the front end would help in the final evaluation.
And I wonder if I could just add
Councilwoman.
something. Just want to add with regards to the whole price situation, that it's really the outlying communities that as the price goes up, we tend to see the loss of services. And I think that all of us hope to continue to grow a transportation system that serves all of Southern Nevada. I think that's going to be good for our future. And so I think that needs to be taken into consideration as well, because we'd hate to see a loss of services to Mesquite or Boulder City or Henderson or North Las Vegas. Understanding that you have the bulk of the population that probably currently uses transit in the urban areas, but I think that the whole idea with even complete streets is to begin to move people out of their cars and to begin to create a system. And so striking the right balance to get people out of their cars and getting them using transit, it has to work. And so you have to have routes that work as well. So
Correct.
It's striking that balance. It's so important.
Excellent point.
Okay, I think we have adequate direction to come back next month and give you some options for how you could structure this as a hybrid based on the feedback that we've received. That will take us to the possible evaluators. And if you go with a traditional request for RFP, there will be a considerable amount of work that will go into that, and there will be a considerable amount of time that will be required. There's less time required for the traditional bid, but the possibilities that you have are the board could serve as the evaluators, the staff, or consultants, or a combination of the three, some sort of combination of the three. I'll go ahead and I'll make my recommendation to the Commission that we have, since I have not heard from any of the Commission whether they want to actually participate as evaluators, they're certainly welcome to do so, but I would recommend to the Commission we have cross-functional staff with augmentation from private consultants.
Commissioner Giunchigliani?
Thank you. I would tend to agree. I think we could reach out to the university to see if there's some folks. I know we're trying to change some processes. Staff absolutely needs to be a key component as kind of the initial gatekeepers as far as, does this even make sense? How is this working? That part of it. But I do think a separate set of eyes need to be there. I don't think we should insert ourselves. And no matter what, we probably should look at having, you have here requires insertion of an anti-lobbying clause in procurement documents. Do we have a similar board policy to what we have with the airport and other places where while an RFP is out there, we aren't supposed to be lobbied on that part? Okay, so that we do have that part of it.
That's language in our procurement document.
Okay, because it sounded like we would require to insert it, and I would think no matter what format we took, we should have that language.
The issue here has been, once it's been posted, then the board has opened itself up to lobbying. You can preclude it. Our original language was lobbying was precluded, period. And in California, actually, it's state law and it's criminal now.
Wow.
To lobby on procurements.
We never mind, don't even get me started on that lobbying issues, but I think we took a few steps at the county recently, but but we should be cognizant of that. But I do think having some outside eyes and ears make very good sense to augment our staff's capabilities.
Very good. Director Martinovich?
Thank you. Just a comment is we're in the process of developing our CMAR process for contract selection. And one of the questions that we had with our transportation board was, could the transportation board sit and be part of the evaluators? Our AG said no. And not only that, they said that the board should not even sit and be or be just observers. So I would just caution you, I don't know what the difference is, but because our board is the final approval of the firm that goes forward, there was very much reluctance of them sitting on the evaluation committees. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have enough direction on that then, Mr. Chairman, unless someone else wants to provide other direction.
I think we're good.
Then I think that gives us the direction that we need on that item, and we will come back with the board for what will hopefully be final action in January. With that, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, unless there are other questions or comments, we can now move to the finance portion of your agenda. And item 43 is to receive the fiscal year 2011 audited financial statements. And we have a representative here from Piercy, Bowler, Taylor, and Kern, who is your designated certified public accountant firm that conducted that audit, and they'll have a brief presentation to make to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Snow. My name is Ryan Whitman. I am a representative with Piercy, Bowler, Taylor, and Kern, and I am here to report to you today the results of our audit, which was conducted on the financial statements for the RTC for the year ended June 30th, 2011. The procedures that we performed were conducted in accordance with the auditing standards accepted in the United States and government auditing standards. We issued an unqualified opinion over the financial statements and on the internal controls for the RTC. For clarification, the unqualified opinion indicates that the financial statements are free of material misstatements, and that's the desired report that entities like to receive. In addition, as part of our audit, we're required under the applicable standards to issue a required communication letter to those in charge of governance as to issues or matters that occurred during the engagement. Those matters include things like significant audit adjustments, waived adjustments, difficulties encountered, and compliance findings or findings. And I'm happy to report that with regards to the findings this year, we did not identify any findings that were reportable findings. I think that's largely in part due to the fact that over the last several years that I've been involved with the RTC, they've really made strived efforts to increase the internal controls and the reporting over their financial statements. And this year, during our testing, we saw the fruits of their labor in our work, and obviously they have too in our report. So I wanted to make note of that because I know they have been working hard and diligently over the last several years to make improvements in that arena. The details of that letter are included and within that letter, and I believe you have a copy of that as well. If you had any questions with regards to the financial statements or the letters, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions at this time.
Comments or questions for Ryan? Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. I will, just for safety's sake, when the contract was given to this firm, I acknowledged that the firm handles campaign expenses, finances for me. So with that disclosure, wanted to be consistent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your next item is citizens' participation, and I have one request from Mr. Christoph to speak.
We'll now open the public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak to the board? Under our new Safe Street signalized system, Mr. Christoph, you'll see the colors.
Good morning, Commissioners. It represents the RTC on their performance and their direction of better service as well as safety. My name is Christoph. I've been with an organization for almost 21 years that made it possible with Bruce Woodbury, the Commissioner, of an oversight committee separate from the regular oversight committee that represents the RTC. I live in the Clark County as well as I have property in the city. There was a couple of things brought to my attention recently this last year, and I spoke to the officials, that's the federal government in San Francisco. I see a great thing that was given funds, federal, from the taxpayers, from the United States of America, to do what we call an upscale, beautifulized Sahara Boulevard from Boulder Highway all the way up to Malapai, interrupting all kinds of businesses that lost a lot of money, traffic that was all jammed up, causing confusion and accidents. But that's not the issue at the moment. The issue is, do we have a bus route on, Mr. Jacob Snow, on Charleston, going the same direction, same miles from Boulder Highway all the way up? Right. Now, for some reason, the state says it's not their fault, and the city and county says it's not their fault. But when I see multi-million dollars giving, stimulated money or whatever they want to call it, to upgrade Sahara Boulevard on the county side and the city side, and I spoke to the Public Works Department in the city, and they said, you know, they're doing it. They told us, you know, they're going to handle everything. But here's something. If you ever walk up on the sidewalk on both north and south on Charleston from Boulder Highway all the way up at the same mile distance that they are on Sahara, you will find gigantic poles in the middle of the sidewalks. The sidewalks are within 3 feet in width, some of them maybe 3.5. Now, I can't imagine we concentrate on Sahara Boulevard and make it beautiful And yet, one of the oldest streets, and still very high-profile traffic, is ignored. And this is why a lot of people from that area and the city saying, what's going on here? So I just wanted to bring it to your attention, commissioners and chairman, that either we are equally doing it in areas of where we have main thoroughways and beautifying the sidewalk with trees that we don't have the water, it costs so much, then I have to bring that to your attention so you can realize that people are dissatisfied. So I want to let you all know that we all are equal in paying taxes, as well as the people in the United States giving the money with us to make these great improvements. And that's why I brought this to your attention right at this time, because if you're going to make the decisions on other things pertaining to contracts, I think that's a very strong issue, and people are watching it just like it was a regular general election. And they are very concerned in the city and the county and outer cities of this behavior of wheeling and dealing. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Mr.
And have a
Christoph.
nice holiday.
Thank you. And if you, you may have missed the Complete Street Initiative presentation earlier, but some of your comments were addressed, so thank you for coming down.
Thank you, Todd Farlow, 240 North 19th Street. I concur with Mr. Christoph, and I pointed that out to Glenn Levitt when we were on the bike trail down there. Chairman Brown, while you've been milking your lame leg excuse through the holiday chore period, I've been out there riding the trails for you. And the place that we're talking about right now is at I-95, actually it's Santa Barbara and Tropicana. It's right there, it's right by I-95. The problem was that there's a new complex going in there, and the developer of that project tore out the bike trail that was going through there. I went to the Planning Commission here in the building, and they didn't know if it was Clark County property. So I went to NDOT, talked to Mr. Bill Handley, and he says that anything on the other side of that block wall that the NDOT has is county responsibility. So I went back to planning down there, asked him to pull the records and asked him if this guy had a permit to tear up that bike trail. They went through all the conditions of the permit, wasn't there. I was sent over to a Mr. Scott Hagan, a Trails Comprehensive Planning guy. And he and I asked him, I says, where is code enforcement here? And he says it's out there on Russell Road or someplace, I don't know. So I was heading on out there, and he says just a minute, he says that he would contact him on that. It's been several weeks now. That contractor has not done anything about that trail. And this is the problem. This is the problem. What this contractor did when he was developing the property, he extended his security fence down to the block wall, which completely blocked off the bike trail, and then tore out the bike trail. Now, he said that the project manager, he said that he had to tear out that bike trail in order to get to a sewer line down there that's 20 feet deep or something like that. But still, he had no permits. And this is something that's endemic to this. We had the same problem down there at Stewart and Eastern down there with Sullins Tire. Like 20 years ago, they took out the fence, extended their property line down, and took out the trail. And then we have to call code enforcement in, the marshals, everybody in the world has to get involved in order to reestablish our bike lane. This guy had no reason to put, and then if he's going to tear out the trail and for the sewer line, and the other thing, why in the world is a sewer line underneath a bike trail? That's another problem I got. But even if he does, say he does have to tear it out to get to the sewer line, why in the world are we sitting here weeks later and it hasn't been put back in? We got to get on these people. We got to stay and we got to protect our trail. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Farlow. And
have a nice holiday.
we have the appropriate representatives from the county, and we'll
Thank you.
look right into it.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jose Mendoza Jr., President Business Agent for the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1637. I just got here a little bit late, but there is a little bit concern as to the splitting of the system. Our local has went ahead and made a request from our international office in Washington, D.C. to our President, Larry Hanley, to review the RFP that might be proposed of splitting the system. We feel that this might be a 13C violation. The transit employees will be worsened, the position will be worsened if it does get split. There's a lot of questions to be answered as to the bargaining unit that we just ratified a contract on October 10th, which was 94%. They are very happy with the contract, as well as I am. And to bring another employer and split the employers, it's going to be kind of hard to tell half of the bargaining unit you no longer belong to the ATU, and who else is going to represent them if another company comes in on the split system. I just want to make sure that you guys are aware, the commissioners are aware, that we are looking into this, and hopefully there's another way that this process could work to keep the bargaining unit intact and not to split the union, because apparently this might happen if you guys split employers. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the board? Seeing no one, will close the public comment period.
Just because of Mr. Christoph's comment, there's a new, I believe, ADA standard that came in on sidewalks for going to 48-inch, but I think we have to adopt a policy at some point or not. And that's what I wasn't sure about, that as we do remodeling, we may now have to come into that standard, which I think in Sahara we would now comply, except for the corner of Maryland Parkway and Sahara, where we have our traffic control boxes still in the middle of the sidewalk. And I would ask that somebody go out and look at it. They did put some asphalt behind it, but if you're on a wheelchair, there's no way you can get around there. So hopefully that could be taken a look at. But I just was curious, as we do the complete streets, do we then come up to that standard, and LEV is not?
Yes, anytime you go back and doing any retrofitting work or reconstruction, you'd have to come into compliance with the sidewalk requirements.
Because Chris is right, we put poles in the middle of everywhere, and I know the city did a good job at trying to modify, but we still have curb cuts not done, and if you're disabled, you can't get around this town. So, okay, thank you.
And to everyone here this morning, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever we celebrate respectively, may they be safe. And I would just like to make a personal comment. Over the last few months, certainly, I want to thank the board for their passion and, most importantly, their professionalism. It is greatly appreciated, and to staff likewise. It's been a tough time, but it's good news today that we've put it behind us and moving ahead for the benefit not only of the RTC, but ultimately our citizens. So I thank you all.